The great Indian mining company, Toastmaster Srinath. Toastmaster Srinath, the great Indian mining company.
The year was 2015. There was frenzy in the city of Chennai. Sundar Pichai was appointed as a CEO of Google. Everybody who's ever lived or loved Chennai at any point in time were celebrating him. And oh, I was overwhelmed to learn that he had studied in the same school that I had. Sundar, I call him Sundar, had sat on the same benches that I had and had lived a few streets away from mine. And I wondered how someone who went through the same education system, just like the rest of us, could be so accomplished and successful. And just like that, my old friend was back. First name existential, second name crisis. Good morning, fellow Toastmasters and my dear guest. I was at fault for two things. Number one, for thinking that we were all destined to become CEOs of major tech companies. And number two, for thinking CEOs of major tech companies is the benchmark of success. Hearing the word education, automatically we think about math, science, and engineering. But we fail to understand it is about discovering our talents. Yes, our individual talents which make us brim with joy. Many people go through their whole lives without discovering their talents. And the very few who do it despite the education system and not because of it. The current education system does not help us in that quest. And my realization came pretty early on. We spent years studying how the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. But imagine our disappointments when we actually learn that it is the earth rotating and not any other way. The mockery. And hilarity aside, there is a smaller undertone, a darker undertone to it. The whole education system seems to be this great mining company, the great Indian mining company. Not unlike traditional mining, it is not too dissimilar to it. Here they mine for minerals, and here they mine for mines, and that too for a singular particular commodity, a specific type that is being searched for, that it is looked on, and everything else is overlooked. Why don't we discover how interesting learning can be until we've actually left school? It's because the current education system and standardized testing came into existence to supply the demand during the Industrial Revolution. So the system is not evil. It is just irrelevant to the current times. It is just outdated. It is close to impossible to uproot the whole system and immediately replace it with something else. But what we can do is make tiny changes, replace continuously and make tiny amounts of change to affect change. We need to make changes in three different parts of the education system. Number one, curriculum, what we learn. Pedagogy is how we learn, and assessments, how well we learn. And I propose three simple steps for educational pluralism. Curriculum by consensus, making alternative education not so alternative, and rethinking traditional carrot and stick grading system. Curriculum by consensus. It is where students as a community decide on their curriculum for that year. Do you remember in those days in school when we had no clue why we were studying what we were studying? It was because what was best for us was chosen for us. How would it be if students were able to choose for themselves what they want to learn? How would it be if they were able to reach a consensus and pick their own curriculum based on actual learning and not just rote memorizing? How would it be if the education system can actually engage students? That would be the ideal world. Moving on to the second proposal, making alternative education not so alternative. Alternative education is where the teaching and learning methods are different from the conventional system. Something that is different from the mainstream education system, like teaching math using stories. Let me give you an example. How many of us can repeat the Archimedes principle? Not many can, but that is all right, because I'm willing to bet that we all know what Archimedes principle is. We all would have heard of this story of the thirsty crow, where it drops pebbles into a pot and to raise the water level. That is basically Archimedes principle. How easy was that? And that is through alternative education. And surprisingly, this is called alternative education and not mainstream education as it should be. Moving on to the third proposal, number 3, rethinking traditional carrot and stick grading system. Now, assessments can be of two types. One, comparative, and number 2, can be descriptive. Comparative is when it is ranked based on another person or an external factor, and comparative if it is based on just a statement of fact. Example, can you sing versus can you sing like Michael Jackson? The traditional stick and grading system assesses our abilities on a scale of numericals and alphabets. You get 100, you get a 90, you get an A, you get an F. You are rewarded if that is what they're looking for, and you get the stick if it's not. They're very high in comparison and very low on descriptive assessment. The correct way would be to balance both of it. To bring about that balance, we need to consider 4-year-olds as just 4-year-olds instead of they're not half an 8-year-old. So there, I believe each of us are born as geniuses. We are creative in our own right. We are creative as children. However, we squander them as we grow up. It fades away. The key is to keep the kid in you alive. Get creative. Remember, if we teach today's children what we taught yesterday, we rob them of a tomorrow. Over to you, Toastmaster of the Day.